Hello, in the previous episode we have uploaded a CSV file to our Ruby on Rails application and we have populated our database with users. And in this episode we are going to download users from our database and all their data. So we are going to go through a few approaches on how to do this. Now, we want to have a button or like a link to download our users. So let's start by adding a link. We're going to go to our users index and add a link to, let's say, download as CSV, and the path is going to be users path, but we are going to respond with another format, not with format HTML, but with format CSV. So I will say format CSV. And CSV is one of the default formats that we can actually respond to in a Ruby on Rails application. So let's have a look what we have. I click download CSV and we have a missing template for this request format. So let's create a template for CSV. Now we have users indexed HTML and let's create a format for CSV. So I will say index.csv.erb. Let's have a look what we have. And you see it is an empty file. Okay, so we can try adding some data here. Let's say ABC. Okay, let's try adding all the users. I will say add users, each do user. And I will display each user's ID, for example. I will say equals user.id. And we have the IDs of all the users. Okay, let's also display the email addresses, for example. I will say user.email. And we have the IDs and emails, but we want them to be in a CSV kind of format, so they will be all in line, and they will have some kind of row separator, column separator, and we'll make it a semicolon. So how can we do it? I would say something like ID equals user ID, email equals user email, and then I would say user hash, or actually I don't need to give it a name. I will just say that I'm creating an array. I will have the ID, the email. Let's have a look at this array. Okay, we have these quotation marks around a string. If we say id.toS, we will also have these quotation marks. So we don't actually need them, and we need to have some kind of a normal looking column separator, and we don't need the array braces. So I will just say dot join, and we're going to join them with a semicolon. And you see, now the data looks like a CSV. So I can just command S, save it as a CSV, and let's try having a look. I'll go to our downloads or desktop. Here we have users that are an actual CSV. Let's try opening the CSV in our text editor. So see, it looks like a valid CSV. Okay, and this way you're quite flexible on having the data. But you see, we don't have headers. We don't see that this is an ID field, that this is an email field. So we would want another field on top. Let's say we'll have a list of fields. So I would have equals fields equals, and we would have ID and email, for example. And let's have a look at our CSV. So I refresh. Okay, the fields are ID and email. Let's make them in the same format. So I would say join semicolon. And now it looks quite good. And like this, you can have a kind of flexible way of displaying the CSV records with a template. So let's try to go back to users, click download the CSV, and you see we are redirected to this page. We don't want to redirect, we want to just save this file. So to do this, we can give an additional attribute to our link to. We will say download, and we'll give a file name. So let's say we have a list of users and we'll have the day when this file was downloaded. So let's say date.today, and we'll join this with some kind of separator. Join. Okay, and now when we click this link to, we're going to trigger the download. So it's going to download whatever the response is. Let me click download as CSV, and you see it downloaded a file. And here's the CSV that we downloaded that is already passed through this editor. Okay, looks quite okay, but there is a better and more correct way using Ruby CSV. So let's try doing the same thing using Ruby CSV. I will go to our users index, and instead of having this download as CSV, I will have just a link to download a CSV without this download button. We're going to pass this file name inside the controller. So here we have index, and we will have respond to do format. We'll have format.html, the default format, and format.csv. Okay, and let's have a look. Let's click download as CSV. So we are redirected to this template, but we are not going to kind of map all these fields on our own. We are not going to say that here we have a semicolon, here we have something else, for example. We're going to use the CSV generator that is defined in the Ruby CSV library. So we have csv.generate, and we're going to use it. You see, we have this CSV generate do CSV, and we can add different stuff to our CSV rows. So let's try doing this. I will go back here, and we're going to say csv.generate something. So I will first have to require CSV in the controller. Require CSV. Okay, and instead of having this random string, I'm going to have a CSV string. So I would say csv.generate do CSV, and the first row is going to be, for example, all the user attributes. So how can we get all the user attributes? I will let's first see how it looks like this. Okay, so you see now that it is not like in a Ruby format. I will say csv generate do CSV. Let's say if anything happens. Okay, let's close the end statement. Let's put this all into Ruby braces. Okay, so we have nothing displayable at the moment. And how can we make it work? So I will try making it as equals csv.generate line, and here I will have let's say user.id and user.email, something like this, and it's gonna be per each user. Okay, we'll actually not use this csv.generate here, we'll just generate each CSV line. So I will say at users.each do user, an end statement, and we're gonna generate a line for CSV for each of the users. Okay, so looks quite fine. And we can also generate a line for the headers above the users. So I would say CSV generate line, and we'll have just some kind of titles. So I would say ID and email. Okay, now you see we have this space here. It is because we have the space here. It is space a space sensitive format, so I'll not have any space here, and looks quite fine. But in this case we have this column separator of a comma. So also another way of generating CSVs, and it's quite fine. But now we are going to do an even better way of generating CSVs that does not require any kind of template. So we're going to respond with format CSV, and we're going to actually use this CSV generate. So let's try moving this code to our model. We have our user model. Let's go to user.rb, and here we're going to put a new method to CSV. def self.toCSV. And okay. And here we're going to say csv.generate. We can also pass some kind of additional attributes here, like column separator should be semicolon. So CSV generate do CSV, and we're going to add some columns. So CSV add all the column names, because the user has the column names of, let's say, name, last name, whatever. Let's say user.column names. So you see, we will try to actually generate a CSV with all the column names the user has. So we are adding the column names, and we are also going to add the attributes. Let's say user.first.attributes.values. So we're going to add this kind of values. Okay, and we're going to have some kind of collection of users. For example, all, a default collection of users. So I would say all find each, or just each, do record. Then I'm going to add CSV of attribute.values. So I would say CSV record.attributes.values. I don't need these lines anymore. An end statement here. So the first line of the CSV are going to be all the column names. Then we're going to get all the user records and get the values of each of these attributes. In this case, actually, we can use whatever, either column name or attribute name. Let's see. User.attribute names. So you see it works. Okay, attribute names and column names. And how can we invoke this? So to be able to invoke this, we would need to move require CSV to the user model. Let's do that. I'm removing it here. And inside format CSV, we're going to see if we need to change anything. So let's go back to our local host. I can actually remove completely this index.csv.erb template. We don't need it at the moment. And here I click to download as CSV. Okay, and we have missing template. So that's fine. We don't need a template for this. Let's try saying format CSV do. Then we will say send data, and then we will invoke the user model dot to CSV, and then we'll say file name equals date dot today, for example. Let's see if this works. Okay, to string, and something has been downloaded. Okay, so it is not recognized as a CSV, so we need to say that the content type is text CSV, so content type text/CSV. Okay, and I just refreshed and it downloaded and seems to be correct, and you see we have all the columns of each user. So looks quite beautiful. And now what did we do? Inside our user model, we've added this method to get all the attribute names and we took all the users, so the whole collection of users in our application, and got the values of each of the attributes. So the ID, the username, the email, and so on. Okay, and what if we don't want to have all the records in some cases? Let's say we want only the current collection of users. So let's make it so that we pass not just all the users, but some collection. So we will add an additional variable to this toCSV method, and we're going to say add users, for example. And it is going to be, so we are also going to have like a collection here. We are passing some kind of collection, and we're going to iterate not on all the records, but in the collection that we passed here. So Let's try making not 100 users, like not all the users, but let's say part of the users. Let's say user.limit 10. Okay, now I'm going back. I'll go to /users, click download as CSV, and you see, just 10 users have been downloaded. So this way you can also have more control over how many users or what particular collection you download instead of just downloading all the users. Okay, looks good. And let's say we want to use this kind of CSV export not only for a user model but also for other models across the application. Let's try doing that. Let's actually create a new model. Let's say Rails generate scaffold post, and the post will have a name. Now Rails DB migrate. Let's say Rails console, and let's say 50.times do, and we're going to create some posts. So let's say post.create, and the post has a title. No, it has a name. So name will be secure random.hex. So we're just going to create 50 posts. Did it work? Let's say post.count. Okay, we've got 50 posts. Let's quit the console. Actually, we don't need to because we already have a server running. Let's go to /posts. Okay, here we have a lot of different posts, and let's try downloading them. So let's add the same kind of link to download as CSV to our posts index. Let's go to posts index, and on top we'll add download as CSV posts path. So I click download as CSV, and it is missing a template. So as in our users, we're going to say format CSV. Let's go to our post controller. So we're going to say, well, not user to CSV at post, but this actually might also work. Let's see. Oh no, it will not work because we'll try to get the user attributes for the post. So we would need to kind of extract this logic from the user model and make it more generic. So we can create a model concern. Here we have this empty folder of concerns. These are for shared logic across models. So let's create a new concern named generate csv.rb. Okay, and in this concern, we're going to extract this to CSV method and require CSV also. So let's move it here, but we'll need to first say module generate CSV, then extend active support concern, and then we'll need to close this. So concern, and we'll say class methods do, and inside the class methods we're going to add this to CSV. Now we'll require CSV outside of it. Then instead of just self to CSV, we're going to have to CSV. So we have to CSV collection, attribute names or column names, whatever. And yeah, this must do the job. And now we'll try to include generate CSV inside our user model and inside our post model. So I will say include generate CSV. And we'll also include generate CSV inside our post model. And now inside the post controller and inside the user controller, we are going to say, we're going to be able to say post.toCSV for the posts, and we don't need to do any changes inside the user model. So let's see if it works. I will go back to our posts. Okay, too few arguments. Why do we have too few arguments? So we have at post, let's see. Why does it say too few arguments? Maybe something is wrong here. So class methods to CSV. Yeah, it must work. Post.csv. Okay, too few arguments. Okay, maybe because I just forgot to add respond to do format in the post controller. So I need to actually copy all this code with the respond to do format. And I will say post.toCSV. Yes, this must do the job. So I will refresh. Undefined method find each for nil clause. Yeah, because we don't have users, we have posts. Refresh. And here we have downloaded all the posts with the secure random hex names. So looks good. And you see, we can now download our posts and our users. So it was quite good. And in this episode, we've gone through a few different ways of generating CSVs, starting from 2 ways to generate templates, where you have quite a lot of control over what the exact output should be, to not having a template whatsoever, but just having a shared concern that can be shared across different models, and you can just invoke it to generate a CSV with all the attributes of any model that you like. So, thanks for being with me. Goodbye.